In the sizzling, silent belly of a Jacksonville summer, the sun hung in the sky like a celestial eye, casting long, drooping shadows across the city. Amidst the languid stir of palm fronds and the lazy undulation of river waves, a figure moved with determined purpose. Detective Elliot was a peculiar silhouette amidst the heat haze. His gaze, smoke-touched and age-old, held a flame flickering in its depths. It wasn't the vibrancy of youth or the glow of idealism. It was the smoldering perseverance of a man who had danced with death and survived. His fingers, knotted and lined, bore the memory of an angry fire. Yet they remained gentle, a testament to his relentless quest for truth. His investigation was a labyrinth he unraveled piece by piece, and his journey led him to an unsettling monolith on the outskirts of Jacksonville. The asylum loomed ominously, its spires stretching like twisted fingers towards the indifferent sky, its aged stone skin gnarled with the tales of time. Within its silence echoed the cacophony of the vanished, the forgotten, the lost. Sweat traced the crevices of his face as he stepped into the echoing, sprawling silence of the abandoned mental asylum. His boots tapped against the cold tiles, each footfall a question seeking an answer in the forsaken corridors. As he delved deeper, the asylum murmured its secrets, whispered in hushed voices by the chipping paint and the mildew-streaked walls. His investigation led him to the administrative room, a crypt of forgotten lives bound in musty paperwork and decomposing leather. His fingers leafed through countless patient files, his eyes piercing through the clinical coldness of the words, seeking the stories hidden underneath. The sun began to sink outside, bathing the room in an eerie sepia glow. The creak of aged paper and the whispering wind were the only sounds that accompanied him as he dived into the asylum's daunting depths. The words from the pages painted a panorama of torment and despair. The asylum wasn't merely a house of madness. It was a crucible of human suffering, where the forgotten were fed to an insatiable void. Yet amongst the despair, a pattern started to form about whispers of an ancient watcher, spoken of in terrified reverence by the inmates. A chilling sense of unease settled into his bones. As he walked through the dimly lit corridors, he felt unseen eyes upon him, a nebulous presence lurking just beyond the periphery of his perception. The dawn arose on a hesitant Jacksonville, unsure if it was ready to unveil the next chapter of its whispered horror. Elliot, his spirit undeterred by the taxing day before, found himself once again at the threshold of the ominous asylum. His quest led him back to the administrative room, where the past awaited him in countless records and tales. Dusted journals, yellowed newspapers, and patient files that held much more than clinical observations became his only companions. In the maddening silence, the echo of faded voices began to emerge from the old pages. The asylum inmates, it seemed, were all but eager to reveal their stories. Their whispers were disjointed, sometimes delirious, their narratives threading the thin line between terror and madness. They spoke of a persistent presence, a dark figure etched onto the canvas of their tormented minds. Conversations with the town's older residents, relatives of the inmates, and the former employees of the asylum painted the same horrifying image. The ancient watcher was a staple in the asylum's history, as embedded into its foundations as the very stone that built it. The terrified hush that fell upon them when Elliot mentioned the entity spoke volumes about its dread-filled reign. One encounter stood out. An elderly woman, the daughter of a former inmate, offered a shaking hand to Elliot. In it was a sketch of a grotesque figure, eyes like blackened stars, formless and chaotic, exuding an ominous aura. Her voice trembled as she recounted her father's rants about the ancient watcher. It was a chilling testimony that lingered long after he had thanked her and walked away. As dusk began to blanket the city, he couldn't shake off the sense of being watched. Each whisper of wind seemed to carry the asylum's voice. Each shadow danced with the ancient watcher's form. The mad had given him their eyes, and through them, he gazed into the heart of an unimaginable darkness. The shadows of a new dawn stretched languidly across Jacksonville as Elliot, a stalwart silhouette against the nascent light, returned to the asylum. It stood in the half-light, a grim specter shrouded in layers of mysteries. Yet, the determined detective had a newfound resolve to peel back its darkness and reveal the truth hiding within. His journey of revelation led him to an unexpected source, the descendants of the asylum's long-gone staff. They were the custodians of a secret legacy, their lives entwined with the asylum's unholy narrative. He sought them out, one by one, like a moth drawn to the enigma's flame. Each meeting was a clash of dread and determination, of unspoken fear and relentless pursuit of truth. One such encounter unfolded in the dim-lit parlor of a retired nurse's home, an old woman whose mother had once served in the asylum. "There are things," she began, her voice a frail whisper, "that lurk on the edges of our understanding, detective. Things that are not meant for the human mind." Her words unveiled a world he had only brushed against in his nightmares. She spoke of a clandestine cult rooted in the asylum's history, its branches reaching deep into Jacksonville's past. This obscure congregation worshipped the ancient Watcher, the cosmic entity. They served it, fed it with the fear and despair cultivated within the asylum's haunting walls. Determined and resolute, he gazed at the asylum under the starless night. It wasn't just a building of stone and iron anymore. It was the mouth of the abyss, a descent into the heart of cosmic horror, and he was ready to plunge into its depths. Under the waxing glow of an indifferent moon, the asylum emerged as a lurking monstrosity from the fog of the early morning. As the first tendrils of sunlight started to paint the horizon, Elliot, with his face etched with a grim determination, descended into the heart of the asylum, where the veil between reality and the unthinkable thinned. The labyrinthine tunnels took him deeper into the asylum's bowels, each step a descent into a chilling tableau of cosmic horror. As he navigated through the catacombs, he discovered remnants of the twisted worship that took place there, arcane symbols etched onto the stone walls, remnants of makeshift altars, and eerie figures drawn in the dust. The deeper he ventured, the stronger he felt the presence of the ancient Watcher. Its invisible gaze seemed to crawl over his skin, a sentient chill that set his nerves on edge. The air grew dense, weighted with an unseen force, a cosmic gravity that threatened to consume him. He found himself standing before an imposing door, its wood aged by time and discolored by damp. A shiver ran down his spine as he pushed it open. The room beyond was filled with an unnerving silence, a chill that seemed to breathe on his neck. In the room's heart was an imposing statue, grotesque in its depiction. It was an abhorrent rendition of the Watcher. Eyes that seemed to hold the emptiness of space, formless, churning with a sense of chaotic life. It was an avatar of the cosmic horror that had loomed over the asylum and its inhabitants. As he examined the statue, he felt the world around him shift. The silence thickened, reality seemed to warp, and he could sense the abyss gaping beneath him, gazing back with an unspeakable awareness. The whispers he'd been chasing were now screams, a cacophony that drowned his thoughts, a cosmic melody that reverberated through his very being. The cosmic entity made its presence known, not as a figure or apparition, but as an oppressive weight on his sanity. It was an all-encompassing terror that knew him, saw him, a dread that pervaded his soul. He was a lone voyager adrift on a sea of cosmic horror, and the Watcher was the storm. He understood the crucial role he was to play, not just as a detective, but as a beacon of hope and courage, a bulwark against the abyss. The following night, cloaked in the inky blackness, was a canvas painted with uncertainty and resolve. Elliot, standing before the asylum, felt a strange kinship with the ominous edifice. Both bore scars of a fiery past. Both held secrets in their depths, and both were on the brink of a monumental confrontation. Armed with the knowledge he had painstakingly gathered, and the ironclad resolve born of his dedication to truth, he stepped into the asylum. This time, he was not an intruder in its haunted corridors, but a challenger daring to unravel its dread-soaked mysteries. The asylum seemed to respond to his changed demeanor. Its halls, once oppressively silent, now echoed with a cacophony that resembled a grotesque symphony. The whispers had evolved into full-blown voices, their narratives taking on an aggressive note. Once again, he stood before the statue of the Watcher, a grim sentinel in the face of a terror beyond understanding. It was there, in the heart of the inferno, that he finally confronted the ancient Watcher. As he challenged the entity, the room shuddered and reality warped. The statue seemed to come alive, its form shifting, churning, a writhing darkness that defied description. The abyss had truly opened up before him, and the cosmic entity stood on the threshold, peering into his very soul. Drawing from his wellspring of determination, he resisted the entity's pull, defying its attempts to shatter his sanity. His unwavering spirit stood as a beacon in the encompassing darkness, a lighthouse against the roiling sea of cosmic dread. He denied the ancient Watcher its feast of fear, replacing it with a defiant resilience. His words echoed in the underground chamber, a firm declaration of his rejection of the ancient Watcher's reign of horror. The declaration was not just for the entity, but for every soul entangled in its web of dread, every victim of the sinister trade, every echo trapped within the asylum's walls. The confrontation seemed to last an eternity, Elliot wrestling with the cosmic entity, standing steadfast in the face of unspeakable horror. And then, slowly, the oppressive weight began to lift. The entity, denied of its sustenance, seemed to recoil, its presence receding, the abysmal gaze retracting. Elliot had walked into the heart of the inferno and emerged victorious. He had not just survived the abyss, but challenged it, stared it down, a solitary human against a cosmic horror. The story concludes not with an ending, but a beginning, a promise of a brighter dawn. He was no longer a mere detective, but a beacon of hope in a world teetering on the edge of understanding. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like it and subscribe to our channel, where you can find more similar stories, and click on the bell icon to never miss one. There is plenty more cosmic horror to come from the Eldritch Tales Factory. Stay tuned, and until next time.